Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare. Oh yeah, we're back to this series. So to give a recap to those who may not be familiar, Alone in the Dark is basically the first survival horror series. If you're a fan of the genre, then you have this series to thank for it. The New Nightmare is an interesting game in the series, as during the gap between it and Alone in the Dark 3, the survival horror genre was fully established as a distinct species of video game. Resident Evil, Silent Hill, and Dino Crisis, Capcom remake please, the foundation laid by that first excursion into the haunted Derceto Manor had been iterated on and refined. This all leads to an interesting situation where the New Nightmare takes a lot of design cues from Resident Evil, which took a lot of design cues from the original Alone in the Dark. There's some interesting stuff to talk about with this game, so I'm gonna... Wait. Did you hear that? Sounds like... Oh god. The logo! Starting off the story of my playthrough, this game was a bitch to get running. It's an older game, it came out in 2001, and like most older games on Steam, neither Valve or the publishers have bothered to make sure it actually works on modern computers, which led to a whole host of problems that I was mostly able to fix with one exception. I don't know what it is, I tried everything I could find on the internet, but I could not get the fucking cutscenes to play. The pre-rendered ones anyway. The in-game ones work just fine, which is good since that seems to be where most of the major story beats happen, but it still sucks because I was planning to use some of the pre-rendered scenes for the mini trailer at the start of this video, but it's whatever, I guess. With that out of the way and into the video proper, I think it's probably a good idea to give you a story summary. There's two main characters, Edward Carnby, a private detective who is a descendant of the Edward Carnby from the original games, which explains why he doesn't have red hair and instead looks like he's about to form a Soundgarden cover band, and Aline Cedric, a professor at the University of Boston who studies Native American history. They each ventured to the very conspicuously named Shadow Island in search of someone. Carnby for the person who killed a friend of his, and Aline for a professor named Obed Morton, who she thinks may be her dad. Just like in the original, you can pick between either of these characters to play, but unlike the original, they both don't just go through the exact same story. Each character actually has their own campaign, which have pretty significant differences from one another and feature different puzzles and areas to explore. Because I'm a hardcore survival horror veteran, I beat the game as both characters. I also just want to point out how funny the select screen is, by the way. For Carnby, his characteristic is just, he owns a gun, and for Aline, it's just, no dad. So, from the beginning, both characters have completely different openings. Their plane gets attacked by some weird monster, and they parachute out. Aline lands on the roof of a huge mansion, while Carnby lands in the woods outside. Aline enters the mansion through a window and meets an old lady who tells you a spooky story, and from there you begin exploring the attic. Carnby, however, has to make his way to the manor from the estate grounds. Because she's a nerd, Aline doesn't start out with a weapon, you have to find one, which even then proves to be less than effective. After looking through the attic and making your way to the second floor of the manor, you meet some asshole guy who knocks you out and steals your jacket. Where have I seen that progression before? Trapped in a locked room, all you can do is wait for Carnby to come get you out. For Carnby's end of things, you have to make your way into the mansion to meet up with Aline. His story has a bit of a slower start. There's a lot of atmospheric build before you actually encounter anything, which I think is because this might be the one they wanted you to start with, but I didn't because fuck your rules. This section is really creepy. I'm almost tempted to just play it uncut and with no commentary, but I don't feel like slaughtering my audience retention, so you'll just have to take my word for it that it's spooky as hell. Remember that gun I told you that Carnby has? Yeah, you get to using it pretty quickly. You get jumped by some zombie dogs in the courtyard and have to fight your way to this like aqueduct and shoot a giant carnivorous seahorse. I'm told they're a major problem in the New England region. After that, you enter the mansion through the basement. Before I go on, if you ever play this game, do not do what I did at first and just go straight into the rest of the mansion. The shotgun's in the basement, and for whatever reason, once you go through that door, you can't go back. Meaning if you go through it without getting the shotgun, you're fucked, because you're gonna need it later. So just take my advice, don't go through the door, turn your ass around, and get the shotgun so the game doesn't fuck you over like it did me. Now that Carnby's actually in the mansion, he gets into the room Aline is trapped in and boosts her up into the attic where she meets some asshole ghost. I don't have much to say about him, he only shows up one other time, so who really cares, but Aline's reaction to seeing him is fucking gold.
Holy shit.
It's at this point in both characters' stories that the game really begins. From here, you're free to explore the mansion, which serves as the main setting for the first half of the game. If you're a survival horror fan, then you've been here before. The first Alone in the Dark had a mansion, Resident Evil had a mansion, Fatal Frame had a mansion, Silent Hill had no mansion actually, never mind. It's the dilapidated, blood-stained playground where you're going to be solving puzzles and trying not to get eaten for the next few hours. There's not as many monsters in this game as in other survival horror titles. You've got the zombie dogs that I mentioned earlier, these weird plant-looking things that are apparently made out of rocks. Minerals! I meant minerals. These zombies that remind me of the headcrab zombies from Half-Life. There's headcrabs too, but they aren't on the zombies' heads, so they fucked that up. They didn't play Half-Life right like I did. There's a couple others, but they show up later, and I also can't think of anything funny to say about them, so we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. I also want to use this opportunity to talk about a few quirks of the PC version. One of the problems I initially ran into was that the game doesn't have an option for running in modern resolutions. This didn't surprise me, most old games have this problem. You have to remember, this was before anyone could count past 1280. Luckily, there's a fan patch which fixes this by letting you use the game's launcher, which the Steam version normally doesn't for some reason, and upscale it from there. This works mostly flawlessly with two exceptions. The first thing is that whenever I picked up an item, it looked like this. And occasionally, the AI for the monsters would bug out and do this. He appears to no longer be an issue. Cool. Other than that, no issues. So you wander around, kill some shit, solve some puzzles, read some documents which illuminate bits of the backstory, and talk to a few side characters that tell you the backstory. You got the two I mentioned earlier, old lady who hates you, gets distracted and forgets that she hates you, then promptly remembers that she hates you and gives you a story item to get you to leave her alone. You got the ghost guy who wants you to get him a mirror. I got the mirror and gave it to him, but I don't actually know what that does since it plays a cutscene I couldn't watch, and then just goes to a game over screen, so I guess it wasn't a good idea. If you don't give him the mirror, I don't know what happens either, but he never shows up again, so I'm considering that problem solved. You got Obed Morton, who it turns out has an asshole twin brother named Alan, who's the main bad guy. And lastly, you got Ian Shaw, an Indian shaman who shows up to dump exposition. Unlike Alone in the Dark 2 and 3, this game slightly returns to its Lovecraftian roots, but goes in a different direction. The gist of the story is that Shadow Island serves as a gateway to a subterranean realm called the World of Darkness, created by White Wolf and now owned by Paradox. Like a gazillion years ago, the world was ruled by these things before a bunch of gods of light came across the planet and said, "These things fucking suck," and ran them off the surface into the caves below. These light gods then create humanity to serve as protectors of the earth, to prevent the shadows from trying to once again overtake the light. It's a story that takes a lot of inspiration from Native American religions and folktales, something that is often pretty underutilized in video games. You might also be wondering if there's any gameplay differences between the two characters, and there isn't really. Aline has a little bit less health because woman in a video game prior to the 2010s, as well as a different revolver, but other than that, they pretty much play the same. The main difference is in the puzzles and items the characters deal with. Maybe it was just me, but I thought Carnby's story was a lot more confusing. There was a point where I was just running all around the mansion with like a billion keys, and I couldn't figure out where to use any of them, and I had to look up a walkthrough, which was pretty annoying. Both characters eventually end up making separate trips to the library, which is roughly the halfway point of the game. After doing some puzzles, you fight a boss, which for Aline is like a giant gorilla zombie, and for Carnby is this pterodactyl thing. Aline's went smoothly enough for me. I just shot the fuck out of him until he fell down, as you do. But Carnby's boss? Oh, that one gave me some trouble. Remember how I made a big deal about getting the shotgun in the cellar earlier? This is why. If you don't get that shotgun, you're fucked here. Once the boss spawns in, you're locked in this room, which doesn't matter because you couldn't go back and get the shotgun anyway, but this thing has so much fucking health. You don't have enough bullets for your revolver, or rockets or grenades for the launchers. The only thing the game really gives you any supply of is shotgun shells. I was not expecting this my first time through, so I didn't have any saves from before I entered the mansion. You know what that means? I had to restart the whole fucking game. So I did. I speed ran all the way back to the library, making sure to get the shotgun, and confronted that bitch with a mountain of ammo in my inventory. And I still couldn't kill it. No, seriously, I sat there and shot the thing for like 10 fucking minutes and it didn't die. Here's what that looked like. So I was fucking confused. I went back to the walkthrough I'd been using to see if there was some specific strategy I was missing, but no. The guy just does exactly what I did. He sits in one spot and unloads on the fucker until it croaks, which for him only took half the shots I rained down on that thing. So I was like, what the fuck? And I looked it up only to find out that there's apparently a bug that randomly happens where the first boss is just straight up invincible. Like, infinite health, can't kill me, I am immortal, essential NPC invincible. Well, that sucks. I read a lot of conflicting things about how to fix it, so I just reset my game and hope for the best. I finally did manage to kill it though, with 2 rockets left to spare. Fucking kill me. After that, you've cleared out the mansion and enter the second half of the story. Aline goes to this fort on the other end of the island, whereas Carnby goes into the swamp surrounding it. Both of these sections are great. Aline has some cool puzzles, and I really like wandering around the woods as Carnby. I actually really wish more survival horror games had you wander around the woods. The only other one I can think of that does this is that Evil Dead game on PS1, but that game also sucks ass, so it's not really a good example. Oh, you're a prick, bro. Oh, he threw me. Okay. The primary objective for both characters here is to go underground to the world of darkness. For Aline, this involves assembling a giant gun that shoots down a wall covering the entrance, and for Carnby, you have to do this really cool puzzle where you use a blue light to find symbols written in blood around the forest so you can enter a code to get into a spooky lab which has another entrance. This is the final stretch of the game, and it is a fucking gauntlet, dude. Whichever character you're playing as, it's just this constant onslaught of infinitely respawning enemies that you have to deal with over and over and over. I said in my Stygian video that's a common trap for game devs to fall into, where in an attempt to up the challenge for the endgame, they just make shit annoying, and this is a great example. It's not hard. I think across both characters I only died once. It's just really monotonous and aggravating. They give you these super overpowered weapons right when you get here, along with a virtually unlimited source of ammo for them, so it's never challenging really, it's just kind of tedious. At least Aline still has some exploration and puzzle solving here, but for Carnby you essentially just walk in a straight line and hold down R2. At the end of the labyrinth, each character fights a different final boss. Aline fights a mutant version of Obed, which is honestly one of the most in-depth and engaging boss fights I've ever seen in a video game. Carnby fights a mutated version of Alan. This fight has a little more to it, but not much. You just shoot him until he trips over, and then you go get a magic spear to kill him with. Oh, fuck. I'm an Indian now. I'm not Indian anymore. After that, of course, the whole place starts collapsing because every game like this has a self-destruct sequence at the end. Both characters hightail it out of there, and I was rewarded with a cutscene I couldn't watch. So that's Alone in the Dark, The New Nightmare, The Old Blood, the movie, the game, the visual novel. Pretty good game, definitely my favorite game in the series so far. It may not have the tightness of design of Resident Evil or the atmospheric or narrative depth of Silent Hill, but it's a good game all the same. It lives up exactly to what its name would imply, a fun spooky trip through the archetypal horror setup. Now if you'll excuse me, I've got an outro to narrate. Hey guys, if you made it this far into the video, I just want to say thanks. It means a whole lot. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, all the standard YouTube outro stuff you hear at the end of every YouTube video. And other than that, I will see y'all in the next video. Goodbye.